Have you ever explored a game and got so immersed in its world because of how beautiful it is? Then from a distance, something catches your eyes and curiosity strikes you like lightning. But as you creep towards it, suddenly you realize you couldn't move any closer. For some reason, there's this very powerful force that's stopping you, even though you're just trying to cross the road.
My immersion!
And it totally ruins your immersion of the game, making you realize that you are staring at a rectangular screen looking at objects made of triangles and polygons. Video games is a very young medium, but within a few years that it existed, it grew up to be a multi-million-dollar industry. But what makes it different from any other mediums? That, my friends, is the magic of immersion. Video games allow players to interact directly to the objects that gives the illusion of it being physically present in a mediated world. David Weevil argues that this is a state of consciousness, which is referred to as a telepresence or spatial presence. Gordon Kaliha created a model called the Player Involvement Model, in which he states has been developed through qualitative research performed during his doctoral dissertation. The model aims to clarify our understanding, involvement, and immersion in games by identifying the major experiential categories that foster involvement in digital games. In the model, there are 6 dimensions to it: ludic, spatial, performative, shared, narrative, and affective. But we will only be looking specifically at spatial involvement. As Kaliha describes it, the spatial involvement dimension defines players' engagement with the spatial qualities of a virtual environment in terms of spatial control, navigation, and exploration. It accounts for the process of internalizing game space that is a powerful factor in engaging players and giving the sense that they might inhabit the place rather than merely perceiving a representation of that space. This defines the quality of your immersion regarding how the mediated game world gives the player a virtual reality. Invisible walls are used in a lot of games. In Fallout New Vegas, there are a lot of collocations that make them seem very accessible. These invisible walls usually lead to bugs or some sort of exploit that will ruin the player's immersion. This is a way to stop players from going to locations that are not necessarily accessible. But does this need to be the case? In the same game, the main quest tells you to go to a place called New Vegas, which is all the way up north from where you start. Well, there are 2 paths that you can travel through: the long safe way or the short dangerous way. The shortcut basically leads you to an area full of monstrous deathless, which is almost impossible for a low-level character to get past through. The player is in turn encouraged to take the longer path, with more NPCs, thus more quests and experiences to gain. The developers have successfully created an immersive barrier in a way. Players have more choice in this instance, and more choice means more engagement from players, thus making it more immersive. Another example is in Grand Theft Auto 4. Something similar happens. This is the first game in the Grand Theft Auto series that has implemented swimming. In previous games, the player drowns when they plummet into the water. Naturally, one of the first things people try in this game is to explore and swim to other islands that have not been unlocked yet. But they're in for a surprise. When you reach a point, you will automatically gain 6 stars, meaning that the law enforcement will go ballistic at you, which prevents you from crossing to the next island. This forces players to go through a certain path, in this case, doing the storyline missions. But those are not really physical barriers. There are mechanics that forces the players to die. They need the assistance from high-level enemies to create this creative boundary. They can still go through the areas, granted it is very difficult to do so. But how about a more straightforward style of making boundaries through contextualization? How about a boundary that forces the player to go back without the use of enemy difficulty? In the Assassin's Creed series, you have to follow the story to unlock certain areas, because the game is technically set in a sci-fi world. The game revolves around accessing the main character, Desmond's memories and ancestors. You control the body of his ancestors, and the following missions are fulfilling the correct memories. When you are trying to go to an area you have not discovered yet, it counts as not following his ancestors' memory correctly, and if you stay there for too long, he will eventually lose points from the life bar and kill you, which takes you to your last save point or checkpoint. By adding meaning to these barriers through linking it to the lore, it creates a more immersive experience for the players. In conclusion, games do not necessarily have to use invisible walls, though it helps in developing it faster and more efficient. There are other ways of creating these barriers without ruining the player's experience and immersion.